All right, me. It is January 2nd, and the first book I finished for this year is Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club. This book is fantastic for a lot of reasons. It's also another piece that is not necessarily written for me, right? Because it is so much inherently about, like I kind of talked about with The Secret Life of Bees, of this kind of mother-daughter relationship that I just don't have, right? It also focuses a great deal on the struggles of immigration, of assimilation, of struggling to exist within two cultures at the same time, right? Which are all things that are not necessarily a part of my life, right? And so, it is very much a piece of literature that, I say it's not meant for me. And what I mean by that is, like, within reading literature, specifically reading fiction, is that very often people have very strong tendencies to be drawn into things that they see themselves in, right? And that's what I mean by this, right? Because there is no me in this. So yeah, that's that. I did a little bit of quick research. The book is structured to be structured in the same way that Mahjong is structured. It is 4 parts that all have 4 chapters in them, so there's a total of basically 16 chapters. And then half of them are focused on the mothers, and these would be the women that were born in China and then immigrated to the United States at some point. And then the other 8 chapters are focused on their daughters, who would have been the first generation born in America, right? And it's, a lot about their struggles, about dealing with this concept of wanting to raise and be Americanized as this 1950s, 60s, 70s version of what does it mean to be, American. How are we, what are we promising as a country to people that immigrate here? So yeah. I think the way that I probably would have read this is that I probably would have read this in a way that is focusing on each family, because it's written mother, daughter, mother, but then their chapters aren't always in the same places. And so there was a lot of going back and checking to make sure of who's related to whose story am I actually looking at right now, that sort of stuff. So yeah. There's lots that you can pull out from this, right? Is that you have, in teaching this, right, this would be something of where I don't think I would pull out the entire book, right? I would probably pull out one specific lineage, and work from there, or I would do the whole book, but assign basically 8 groups or 4 groups, and then each one focuses on one specific lineage, right? Because, right, there's a lot of interconnectedness here, but I think that each individual storyline, even though it's very connected with everyone else, right, is that they all express themselves in very, very specific ways, and all deal with very specific struggles, right? The big ones that I could think of are Jing Mei, who is kind of our main through line. The Joy Luck Club is a club that got started by Jing Mei's mother while they were fleeing Japanese invasion into China, and while basically living as a refugee, began this kind of club to attempt to celebrate some sort of life and some sort of livelihood. And then immigrated to the United States, founded this club again with 3 other women to basically celebrate living, right? And then before the story even begins, Jing Mei's mother dies, and she's asked to take her mother's place at this club. And then from there, the rest of the story kind of unfolds. And it kind of bounces between this story of, I think the best way to envision how I view what is occurring here is that these are all stories that are being told at this table. And then we're kind of bouncing between what is being told by the parents and then what is being told by their daughters eventually down the line once they've also taken the place of their mother in the Joy Luck Club. And yeah. Lots of focus on especially this dynamic between what we view as very traditionally Chinese or communistic viewpoints and what we view as very American and democratic viewpoints, of where a lot of the mothers end up with this viewpoint of being obedient or being, quiet or subservient is a way to survive, right? And that comes from different points in all of their stories, but a lot of it has to do with their relationships, especially romantically, about how they were given up or how they were basically used as property of movement, and things like that, right? And so to be obedient, to be subservient was a way to ensure your survival in a world that did not care what you had to say. I think back to The Godfather with this, right? And where we talked, right? I specifically talked about my interest in that, like, these are what I think really makes the book interesting, is that it is so much about women who have basically no rights and no say within their families, then encouraging in very subtle ways to do very specific things and really controlling all the power. And the same thing kind of happens here, right? Of where there's this great fear, and they choose as to act this way because that is the culture, that is who they are, and that was expected of them. But then they get to, in very significant ways, control the narrative of what's around them, and significantly have very significant hands in what is happening around them, but they can only do it in very, very small amounts, right? They don't have control over daily life. They have control over this one event that's going to occur, which is, massive, right? But then you get to the daughters, who are all American raised, and there's this whole thing about not being Chinese within their life, and things like that, right? And what you end up seeing is that the daughters have this very, very intense, I need to have control over things. I want to have choices about things. I don't want to be controlled over things, right? And that my life is my life and everyone else's life is everyone else's life, right? Because that last part becomes a really big sticking point for all of the girls when they are young, is that, right, their mothers have given up and sacrificed and have lived in this world in which the only thing that they can be fully proud of, in a way or in a sense, is their children. And what ends up happening is that all of the children in some way end up resenting this, right? And I was the same way, right? It was embarrassing. It was this kind of fight of, why I'm just trying to do stuff. Why do we feel that we need to market me as a genius or parade me around as this prodigy, right? And then kind of basically just having that struggle over control and narratives about one's life, right? And yeah. I think the other thing to say is, it comes from actually the very first chapter of the book, which is that we end up learning about this kind of whole story that Jingmei had no idea what was happening and it had occurred, which is that her mother actually had 2 children in China that she was forced to abandon while she was a refugee, and eventually found them as adults and was going to try to visit them, and then she unfortunately passed, right? And so you kind of have this whole thing, and Jingmei looks at the table and basically was like, what am I going to tell them? I know nothing about my mother. And all of the women at the Joy Luck Club are basically reacted a very confounded way, right? And as Jingmei expresses, it's not even that they were afraid or they were upset that I didn't know all these stories about my mother. It was that I was the stand-in for all of their own daughters, and they realize that all of their own daughters really don't know anything about them, right? Because it is this culture of, right, all these mothers have raised and lived in this culture of to be to hold things in and to be silent and to be obedient and to express things in roundabout ways, right? And their daughters, being very American, don't have the patience for that, right? And so, you know, Jing Mei becomes kind of the stand-in for all of their daughters, really. Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. I think that's it for the Joy Luck Club. Very fantastic book. Yeah.